So today we are going to speak about the development of the brain, especially in the children and young ages, with Dr. Kathryn. Dr. Kathryn is the CEO and the founder of Future Strong Education in Australia. She is an early childhood expert as well. She is a keynote speaker. She is a workshop facilitator. She uses her experience, her knowledge, and her experience in this field to help parents and to help child and help early children internationally. She is also she has been awarded, let's say the let's say the distance educator of the year multiple times. Congratulations, Dr. Catherine, on that. She is also the best early childhood international mentor. Her main goal is to give the parents and the early children the best chance and the best shot at their endeavors in education locally and internationally. Dr. Catherine, could you please start with what exactly happens in the brains of children?
Well, when children are born, they have a need because they are a baby human. So they have a need to survive. So to start with, they have to attach to an adult human so that they can survive. So the first thing children do in their survival mode, which is the bottom part of their brain, their the reptilian part of their brain stem, which is sort of sits at the base of your skull, that kicks in. And when the mother or the father is nursing the baby and they're looking down at the baby and the baby's looking back at them, the adult smiles at the baby. And as the baby gets a little older, the baby starts to smile back, right? So that's the baby bonding with the adult human, and that's the
Okay.
adult human bonding with that baby. So they're attaching to each other. So the baby's attaching and the adult is bonding. And that's a survival technique. And we all think as parents when our babies are born that they instantly fall in love with us. And I'm sure they do, but it's actually survival as well. So that's part of the brain taking care of the baby when they're first born. Now, the other thing that happens when children are born is, of course, as you would know, everything goes into their mouth, right?
Yeah.
Because this organ is the most sensitive part of their body. So thumbs go into it, toes go into it, sticks go into it, everything goes here, so that babies can explore the world. Because babies are born natural explorers. And the best ways for babies to explore, and as they get a little older, and we're talking about children now, the best way for them to explore is obviously through their senses. So the smell, their hearing, their taste, their sight, and everything that they touch. So it's really important that we as parents or educators make sure that we have a range of stimuli for the children. And that helps develop the different neural pathways that are happening in their body. And all of the different synapses start to fire, and messages and electrical impulses start firing through the brain. And as children are exploring through their senses, they're starting to develop skills. And those skills form the neural pathways in their brain. So they're learning how to do things by exploring and using all of their senses. So it's an important thing to both allow children and encourage children to use as many senses as they can in as many ways as they can so that they can explore, and you can provide that stimuli for them to extend their thinking and extend their brain. The other thing that is really important for babies and young children and all of us, even as adults, is to build relationships. And relationships stimulate the brain as well, because it encourages all of those warm endorphins that float through the brain and make us feel all warm and fuzzy and happy. And when we're feeling warm, fuzzy, and happy and calm, we can think and we can remember. So our brain is much more efficient if we're nice and calm. My favorite saying is, a calm brain is a thinking brain. And so to calm ourselves down, sometimes we need to take some deep breaths. So that's what you can encourage children to do if you find that they're just getting all flustered. And that's what we can do as well, calm ourselves by using some deep breaths. And that encourages the blood flow up into the brain as well. And that calms everything down and reduces that level of cortisol. So there's not as much anxiety in the brain. But having those strong relationships, and that first starts with that attachment that I talked about a moment ago, when the baby's first born and the baby tries to attach to the adult human, and you know, the mother or father bonds with that child. That's a really a really important part of development, that attachment and that bonding right at the very beginning. And then from there, healthy, positive relationships begin. And when children are feeling safe and secure, that helps with that brain development and taking a risk and learning new skills and learning different things, because the children are stimulated and they feel safe and secure. That's a really long answer to a very short question.
It is awesome, Dr. Kathryn. So you are always amazing. So my question here, okay, this is the beginning of the development of the brain. Like, does the brain keep going in growth, and how does it grow?
Mm. So if you want to think about size of a brain, a 5-year-old child's brain is about that big, the size of a fist. An adult's brain is about 2 fists. So it does keep developing, and there is the pruning of the neural pathways and the synapses. There is pruning that happens at times when, you know that saying, use it or lose it? Well, it's the same in the brain. So if the neural pathways aren't being used, the dendrites are pruned off, and because they're not needed anymore, and it makes room for new neural pathways to be formed. So the brain keeps molding and shaping itself as it's exposed to different stimuli and different experiences, and has to accommodate different skills, and has to learn different things. Now, from birth, there's this white sort of substance that's across the brain called myelin. And the myelin sheathing helps to connect the synapses in the brain, and that's where the message goes across. So the electrical impulse goes from one side to the other, and there's a little gap there. So as children grow and develop, there's this jelly-like substance that goes across this gap, and it helps to join them together. So the electrical impulse, or the message, or the instruction that we're giving the children is able to jump from one side to the other, because it's wrapped in this lovely jelly sort of like stuff. Now that gets thicker and thicker as we get older and older. In fact, you know, it's still developing when children are in their teenage years. But it's that myelin sheathing that develops in the early years that allow children to start following instructions. And I think we may have spoken about this the last time that we talked about following instructions, and how sometimes there's this thing called leakage in the brain, and the message doesn't go across from one side to the other, because that myelin sheathing hasn't occurred. So there's a gap. So the message doesn't go from one side to another. So that's the main sort of thing. There's that pruning that happens as we get older, and the neural pathways change and develop and get deeper and stronger if we're doing things over and over. Those neural pathways get stronger. So we end up being able to do things without even thinking. Like, we brush our teeth without even thinking about it, don't we? And sometimes we drive from one place to the next and we don't even think about it. And we think, how did we get there? Because we can't remember, because it's not conscious. Because the neural pathways are so firm in those areas with that skill and the skill development there, that we don't consciously have to think about it all the time. So it becomes a routine, becomes a habit, and it's because it's already ingrained in your brain. So yes, the brain does keep continually evolving and improving itself. There's that thing called neuroplasticity, where the brains can adapt if there's been an accident, or some part of the brain isn't working for some reason. I'll tell you a short story about myself. When I was born, I had a lot of I had a lot of blood around my brain, and it killed off some areas of my brain, and the doctors told my parents that I would never survive, that I would die, or I would be so challenged with my brain development that I'd need to be in an institution for the rest of my life. So they told my parents to just go home, just leave me there in the hospital, because there was no hope for me. Well, here I am. They obviously didn't leave me in the hospital. And my brain healed itself, and different neural pathways were developed because the dead parts, or the parts that the excess blood had damaged, were able to be repaired, or my brain adapted in such a way that I was able to learn and develop skills. Now, it took me a little longer when I was a little child to develop the same skills, so my milestones were a little bit slower than everybody else. But the point is, it worked. It happened. So our brain is such a miraculous thing. And I'm not a neuroscientist, and I really wish I was, because it's such a fascinating topic to talk about.
Okay, so my question here, like according to your experience, like are our trained more automated or more trained?
Sorry, what do you mean?
Like, okay, you say you spoke about the ingrained skills and the ingrained knowledge in the brain. Like, can we retrain our brains?
Yeah, we can retrain our brains. It's about developing different neural pathways. So think about people who have had a car accident and they've had a head injury, or someone who's had a stroke and they have to learn how to walk again, or they have to learn how to talk again. That's the brain being, it's training itself again, different neural pathways. So those neural pathways that they used to use, they may not work anymore, but the brain is so clever that it can form a new neural pathway, and it can find other ways to connect with the rest of the body. So yes, it can retrain itself and fix itself. There's been lots of studies about people who smoke too, and people who smoke, some of those synapses and the dendrites, that they burn off or die because of the smoking, and people stop smoking and it comes back. So it's an amazing organ that we have in our skull.
So the next question here would be about parents and would be about teachers. Like, what can we do to enhance, to help with brain development?
Well, as we said a little earlier, having a lot of stimuli for the children, making sure that they have a lot of activities where they can stretch their brain, and that means thinking. So as a parent, we want to give our children opportunities to think for themselves. We want to pose problems. Like, we've got so many people coming over for dinner tonight, and I'm not sure how many knives and forks we're going to need, or how many bowls we're going to need. Can you help me work it out? And let the children work it out. I mean, we can do it because we're an adult, but we need to let the children have the opportunity to extend their thinking, or pose a problem, like what would happen if. So what would happen if there was no petrol in the car today? How else would we get to the shops? Or some other sort of problem solving things. So let the children use their own brain to work out the solution to any sort of problem. That's one thing that we as teachers and parents can do. The other thing is to give children responsibility, and that allows them then to start feeling more confident within themselves, and that builds their own self-esteem, so they feel better about themselves. And that too means that they will feel secure and they'll take a risk. So they'll try something new, and just to see if it works. And that's them using their brain and being creative. Having a range of materials out for children if we're in the classroom or at home, so a range of things so that children can be creative and use their imagination. That's a really important thing too. So at home, you might let the children have a couple of sheets, or some old pieces of paper, or some ribbons or some scarves, and just let them create. Just see what they come up with, and let them use their brain and be creative. The other great thing to remember is, if you're a parent and your child says to you, "I'm bored," that's the most exciting thing that you can ever hear, because that's fantastic. It means good. If you're bored, that means this is an opportunity for you to use your imagination and for you to be creative. It's not the opportunity for you to entertain, or to give them a screen of some sort, or to find an activity for them to do. Let them find it themselves, so that they're using their own brain and extend their own brain and their own thinking. So that's a really important thing, I think, to think about if you're a teacher or if you're a parent. Think about whose brain is being used here. Is it mine, or is it the child's brain? because it's the child's brain that needs to practice, not so much our brain.
That is awesome. Okay, let's go to the other side of this point. Like sometimes, let's say, activities or things we do may derail, may harm this kind of development. What kind of activities do you think like can do that?
Really structured activities. So, you know, we've all seen the colouring in books and children colour in between the lines. That's the idea of it. It's very structured. It doesn't allow children to think. All that does is allow children to get a pencil and just go backwards and forwards. And people might say, oh, yep, that's great, fine motor development. That's true, but there's a lot of other ways that you can get that same fine motor development without them just colouring in around a line that somebody else has made. Allow them to make their own picture and colour it in, or allow them to do something useful, like let's make the shopping list together. You do the writing. Let's try and work out the words together. You know, do things like that for them so that they have to be thinking and they are using their own skills. The other thing to do with children to make sure that their brain is developing is to make sure that you give them a healthy diet. Particularly boys need protein in the morning, so some sort of like eggs or some sort of meat or something like that in the morning for breakfast, particularly boys, but all children, so that they've got enough protein to stimulate and work their brain all day. So eating well is good, a healthy diet, not too much sugar. Sugar, you know, it impacts the brain in not a very good way. So we want a healthy diet. We want heaps of water, because there's a lot of water in the brain. The brain's made up of a high percentage of water. So we need a lot of water. And also make sure that your child is getting enough sleep, because if they're getting enough sleep, their brain will wake up bright and early, like we know that ourselves as adults. But that's when growth happens in young children, when they're sleeping. So we need to make sure that they get plenty of sleep, because that's obviously going to impact on the next day with them being able to handle and manage different situations. So just to recap, a good diet, plenty of sleep and lots of water helps that healthy brain development, as well as giving children lots of open-ended opportunities to think and use their brain, not giving them structured things to do, not you using your brain all of the time. In saying that, though, I want to be clear that at times children do need to have structured things to do, particularly if you're teaching them a skill. So if you were teaching them how to use scissors for the very first time, you wouldn't just give them a pair of scissors and think, well, you use your brain. That's not what we'd do. We would show them how to use the scissors. We'd cut some things with them. We might draw some lines and say, try and cut along the line. We would teach them how to use it. Once they know how to use the scissors, then we might open things up a little bit and suggest that they have a go at doing different things with the scissors. So there are times where we need to be a little structured with children, but there are times too where once they've got the understanding and they've got the skill, let them have a go themselves and explore the world themselves. Because I go back to our very first point that children are born natural explorers. That's what they want to do, that's what they do best, and that's what they need to do to stimulate their brain.
That is awesome. Okay, let's go to the children or the early childhood behavior. Does it come from the brain mainly, or does it depend on emotion, or what happens?
Okay, so this is a really big topic, and this is one that I love talking about, and I could talk for like a day about this. So I'm just going to give you this much because it is a really big topic. So when we're talking about behavior, brain, emotions, we have to remember that as children are born, they communicate in a particular way. So it might be facial expressions or it might be crying. Now, if you're a parent, you start to understand that language. You would start to understand the different cries, what the different cries mean. I need my nappy changed, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I've got a pain in the tummy. You know, you get to know that. So that's their form of communication. Now, as children get a little older, they're trying to communicate in an adult world, and sometimes that doesn't always work out. So we all have heard about the terrible twos, the tantrums, when children are two and they scream and they yell and they stamp their foot and all of those things. Often that's because they're frustrated because they can't articulate what they want to say. So if you're at the shops with the children and they're wanting to buy some sweets or lollies or candy in the shop, and you're the parent and you're saying no, you can't have that, and they start to scream and they start to yell and they say, but I want it, I want it, I want it. That's the best they can do. They really can't say to you, Mum, I really would prefer if I could have one of those lollies because I've got a craving for sugar at the moment and that would really fulfill my craving. Like, they're not going to say that. They can't say that. So the best they can do is cry and stamp their foot and try and communicate with you that way and hope that you'll give in and give it to them. So behaviour is a form of communication. That's where I'm going with all of this. We all use behaviour to communicate with each other, even us as adults. When you give someone a hug, what are you communicating? When you have a frown on your face, what are you communicating? So behaviour and action is all part of communication, and that's all the children are doing. Now, of course, it goes a little deeper when we're starting to look at how children are growing and developing. At the very beginning, I talked about the brain and the brain stem. So the brainstem is all about survival. That's that fight, flight, or freeze that you might have heard about. So, if you're in a place of danger or you're feeling unsure, you can run away, you can, flee, you can fight, or you can freeze, just do nothing. So that's the bottom part in the brain. Up here, and I think we've talked about this, up here is this little gland called the amygdala, and the amygdala is all about emotion. So if your child is upset, that emotion, that upset emotion, links down here to the brainstem, and they start either running away or screaming at you, because that's the fight, screaming at you, or they freeze, so they just won't say anything. So those two are linked together with behaviour. Now, if that happens, it's a waste of time trying to talk to your child when they're here, when they're in the brainstem or they're here. Waste of time, because they're so consumed with how they're feeling that anything that you say to them is not going to be heard. They just won't get it, and it's a waste of time. So give them a cuddle, make them feel safe. Then you can talk to them and say, that's not what we do in our family, or the reason you couldn't have those sweets in the shop is because. You can talk to them then, because by then this has calmed down and their thinking has moved up to the top of their head, to the mammalian thinking part of their head, where they can, problem solve and have that logical thinking and think things through a little more. So if your child is trying to communicate to you in a way that isn't appropriate, don't try and talk to them. Wait till they calm down. Sometimes they need to go and sit in a quiet place to calm down, take some deep breaths, calm themselves, then you can talk to them. But all behaviour is around needs, fulfilling needs that they have. So they might have, and this is a whole story, this one, but I'll just give you a little bit. So the needs that we all have, our behaviour is driven for the need for attention, the need for power, revenge, or avoidance. So for young children, if you think that they're just trying to get attention from you, give them the attention, but do it in a way that is right for you. Do it in a positive way. So if they're being really naughty, try and ignore that naughty behaviour. But when they start to do the right thing, immediately say, I love the way you're standing there now and you're not hitting your sister. So you comment on the good stuff. So you give them attention for the good stuff. So they're still getting attention, but it's for the right stuff, right? Yeah. There's power. There's, children in a power struggle, go and put your shoes on. No, put your shoes on. No, put your shoes on. No, there's a power struggle going on there. So the way around that is, what are you going to do? Put your shoes on first or your socks? maybe it doesn't matter what, you know, you've given them the choice. They're going to work it out. It's a win-win for you. They're going to put their shoes and socks on, so it's a win-win for you. But you know how they choose to do it, that's their choice, and that's how to address the power. The avoidance and the revenge sort of go both into both of those as well. So you know you can use the same sort of principles for that. But what I want to stress is this is a bigger topic than what we've got time to talk about today. And all behaviour is around communication, and it's all linked to the brain development and the wants and needs of your child, whether you're in the classroom or whether you're at home with your children. So just to sort of recap a little, we talked at the beginning about that attachment with a baby and the importance of building relationships, and we've talked about having a lot of stimulus for children so that they can use their own brain and they can think for themselves rather than we adults taking over and doing all of the thinking for the children. We need to allow them to form those new neural pathways by having a go and taking a risk and experimenting and exploring. And that's a really important thing for young children to do, and all of us to do, really. None of us like somebody just doing everything for us. We all want to do it ourselves and to learn the skills to do it out for ourselves. Children are no different. So we talked about that, and then also keeping your brain healthy, how to keep it stimulated, and then of course about how behaviour is really just a form of communication.
Yeah, it has been more than awesome as usual talking to you, Doctor. Thank you so much for that indeed, and have a wonderful day ahead.
Thank you so much. Lovely to speak to you again.